faithful. That is, we're supposed to believe in God, trust in God with all of our being. And if we put Him first in our life, and I think that's the context in Matthew chapter 6 of the Sermon on the Mount. He's actually dealing with the physical, material things. We put Him first in our life, then all these things are going to be given to us. Things are going to work out for us, and we have to continue to believe that. And I know people that they say, well, I've been doing that for years, but it still hasn't worked out. Well, again, how strong is our faith? James talks to us about, we're going to be tried. And by being tried, it's going to show how strong our faith really is. And the stronger our faith is, the more, I guess, the easier it will be for us to overcome some of the problems that we face in life. And even face the consequences of choices that we've made.
And so, personal responsibility is certainly a factor here. And good people don't always make good decisions, do they?
Right.
And good people sometimes make decisions. Well, an example of where maybe you're traveling too fast and you go around a curve and you lose control of your automobile and you hit a tree. Well, it wasn't a good decision to travel that fast. But also sometimes good people make sinful decisions. And when we choose to engage in a sin, there are going to be consequences to it. So I think that's a very valid point that you brought up, Chad, and that is that we have to bear the responsibility of the choices that we make. That's one reason why bad things happen to good people. What's another?
Well, of course, we live in a world that doesn't want to live own up to personal responsibility. Everything is somebody else's fault, and so that's one of the things that comes to my mind. But Bobby touched on another one. And that is other folks. Sometimes we suffer because of our own freedom of choice. Love allows freedom of choice. God is love, therefore He allows us freedom of choice. But God also allows other people freedom of choice. Suppose a lady who is pregnant with a child decides she's going to do drugs throughout the duration of that pregnancy. And that poor little baby is born addicted to drugs, or maybe is stillborn, or other problems that result from that. I read a story just a couple of weeks ago about a lady that was her mother attempted to abort her, and she was born with severe physical handicaps because she survived the abortion. Does a person like that look up at God and say, why did you do this to me? Or at a funeral for a person that maybe a little baby dies as a result of something the mother did during the pregnancy. Does anyone have a right to stand up at the funeral and say, well, this just was the will of God? Obviously, that's not God's will. We reap the benefits of other folks' freedom of choice. I've never invented a thing in my life that I'm aware of, but someone invented air conditioning. Someone invented television, the internet. We reap those benefits. How can we not expect somewhere along the way to reap the negative consequences of other folks' freedom of choice?
And we're seeing that right now, even in the Middle East, are we not? Where some innocent people are reaping the consequences to the sinful decisions of other people.
And we wouldn't dare say, why is God doing that over in the Middle East? Well, God's not doing that. There are free moral agents making decisions to shoot missiles, to drop bombs, whatever. And innocent people are dying because of it. That's not God's will that those innocent people die. It's because of someone else's freedom of choice.
And we wouldn't want to live any other way, would we, as far as not having free choice?
Right.
I mean, we enjoy that as a blessing and a gift.
Sure.
And
Sorry.
Go ahead, Bobby.
But it comes back to that, why is it that people want to blame God, though? Why cannot people see that maybe it is their choices or the choice of someone else? Why turn and say, well, why is God doing this to me? Why blame God? Why do you have to blame someone with your problems? Especially if you look inwardly and say, well, I caused the problem. I need to work this problem out. How am I going to work it out? Or if someone else caused the problem, well, maybe I don't need to be around that person. Maybe I need to change some of the people I'm around. But there are accidents like we were talking about where things like that happen. But again, the question comes back, why would a person want to blame God in the first place?
All right. So there again is another reason why bad things happen to good people. Because of the choices of others.
Sure.
What are some other things, other reasons?
Well, I think one thing that comes to my mind a lot of times is natural disaster. a tornado comes through. Of course, we're very familiar with, not too long ago, the tsunami in Asia that killed a lot of people. Tornadoes often happen. I'm from an area in Alabama that was, it seems like we got tornadoes, numerous tornadoes every year. And inevitably somebody just about almost, it seemed like always would, at least one person would die in those tornadoes. But that happens. Earthquakes, natural disasters. Again, this is not something we shake our fist at God and say, why'd you do this? That's just nature.
Can any good come from a tragedy such as that?
Sure.
Bobby, what kind of good can we reap from a tragedy?
I've often noticed that in places where I've preached, that when tragedy comes, now whether it be a storm such as we've talked about, or other storms, or even the storms in people's lives, the tragedy in their lives, that all of a sudden they're interested in God. They're interested in what the Bible has to say in reference to their becoming a child of God, or if they're a child of God and they've fallen away, how that they can come back. They want to be faithful because of this tragedy that's happened in their life. And so there are some of those things that they could, that they learn that are good from the tragedy that does take place. And not only that, but it could just change their life in general, not in the sense that they look for a spiritual outcome, but someone who has caused harm to others and says, I've caused this tragedy. I don't need to drink anymore. I don't need to do this anymore. I don't need to speed anymore, or whatever it may be. And so they change those things. But it's our hope and our prayer that when tragedy strikes that way, yes, people stop and think about God.
I think about that passage of Scripture from the Old Testament that says, it's good to go into the house of mourning. There's a benefit to suffering. There's a benefit to grief. There's a benefit to sorrow. And, that benefit sometimes is because it gets us to focus upon what's really important in life. We get so caught up in our busy world, busy this, busy that. And it's easy, is it not, to lose sight of what's really important in life, and then something bad happens, a tragedy. Someone dies, someone gets sick, and what do? Well, we can do one of two things. We can either turn toward God, or we can turn away from God. And, that's a test of our faith. But if we turn toward God, if we're drawn closer to God, there is a benefit that is reaped through that. Chad, do you have something you wanted to add to that?
Well, I think Bobby touched on a good point here, is that for something to be evil, it has to contain no intrinsic good. You can't say that about suffering. Think about the child that has no feelings in the nerves in his hand. He could set his hand on a hot stove eye and just burn his hand off and never feel it. Suffering, pain, many times gets our attention, lets us know there's a problem. And so, we touch a hot stove eye, what do? We jerk our hand back because the pain tells us that's not good for me. Many times the pain in our lives, the suffering in our lives is a good thing. Sometimes stomach pain gets a person to go to the doctor. Maybe they find out they've got a tumor. Maybe it's cancerous. It gets removed and they're able to go on with their normal lives. And so in that situation, the suffering was a good thing. And again, sometimes, as Bobby mentioned, it makes us look inwardly and go, how am I living my life? Am I prepared for anything beyond this life? And it makes us start to think about our spiritual condition. And so many times, suffering can be not just a good thing, but, I've heard some people say that, this bad thing that happened in my life was the best thing that ever happened because it made me think about my life spiritually and helped me get right with God.
Absolutely. Bobby?
Well, I have a lot of thoughts that, come to my mind when we start talking about the suffering thing, because seeing people suffer and the things that they have to go through, and then they will ask, again, the same question comes back is, why is this happening to me? What have I done? And I have even asked people, well, let's just stop and think about what you've done. Go back in your life. Let's look at your life and see, what has your life been? And why are you suffering like this? And some of them, after, going back, says, well, you got a point. Let me think about my past life and see, did I actually cause this? Because they want to blame somebody, but, we really don't want to blame ourselves first. And so many of them will go back and says, well, I made this decision, I made this decision, and these types of decisions I've made has destroyed my health, or it's brought about the problems that I'm facing personally now. And I think also that how that the things that we're involved in life, even before we become a child of God. There's some of those, and we have to pay consequences of those, and they change our life, the environment that we find ourselves in.
Good. So if I understand what we've discussed today, I understand you brethren to say that though we all go through suffering and hardships and trials, that doesn't necessarily mean that there's no benefit that is derived or reaped through such. Of course, we think about Job. You know, that's a wonderful Old Testament example of a man who suffered greatly and severely, but yet a man who kept his faith in God. Oh, he questioned God, but he kept his faith in God. And we look at the end of his life and we see that he was blessed in such a tremendous way. Well, brethren, our time has quickly gone by once again. But I am thankful to have you with us. I know that the discussion we've had today will certainly be helpful to all of us and those who are watching this program today. Bobby, I hope your work continues well in Cartersville, and Chad, yours over in Chattanooga. It's been good to have y'all with us. I'm Barry Gilreath, and thank you for being with us for another program of Fabric of Family. Until next time, good day.
Let's make the most of a minute.
Speech on. Volume 100. Music app. Hearing device. Page 1 of screen mirror. Brightness selected. Screen recording.